Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast. To join a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice, head to xyadvisor.com. G'day, how's it going? What do you know? Strike a light. Clayton here from XY, chatting with David, who has a pretty interesting story to do with, I'd say, formerly the number one financial services company in Australia, but AMP. Mate, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, look, good to be here. I think this is definitely a story that needs to be told because there's a lot of stuff that's AMP doing their level best to sweep under the mat.
Yeah, and I guess my interest in this topic comes from the fact that AMP, it's been such a backbone of financial services in this company for so long, right? It goes back how long? 150, 160 years, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Been instrumental in the development of the entire industry. I've known many people who are amazing people that have worked in AMP over the years. And it's had, I think, a lot of good intentions. And I'm probably just a little bit disappointed because AMP, which was, the number one financial services company in Australia, had a contract, right? And in that contract, they said, planners, we want to, I guess, protect your downside if you're willing to help us on the upside. And that was a bit of the trade-off, back in the day, right? It was certainly back in the day. Then FOFA came in, sort of changed that a bit. It was, in fact, at that stage, that sort of post-FOFA stage, it broke the law to provide AMP with that upside. And AMP suffered the natural consequence of that law change. And I think in a lot of ways, their hands were tied. Everything changed from underneath them. My issue has come about where AMP has said, the rules were changed on us. So now we're going to change the rules on our planners. And the issue that I have there is there was a pretty tight contract where it couldn't be changed. The new management there decided to change it. There were obviously big issues in that with people losing a lot of money. So, and we've had Neil McDonald on before, the head of their AMP FPA, discussing, the class action. So that was started. But as all this was happening, about 200 or 300 planners were given a contract. And this contract is now infamous, and yet I don't know anything about it. And so I wanted to chat to you because you know about it and you can talk about it. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, look, as I said, it's a story I think that is in desperate need of telling. And the reason nobody knows about it is because AMP is doing such a really good job of stopping the truth from leaking out. Just to address a couple of things that you said there, the Bolar contract was never about being commercial. And yeah, it was about, in my mind, not so much of AMP doing the right thing or being nice about it. It was purely business in that at 4 times, nobody in their right mind would even think about selling their business outside the AMP network. It was just way over the odds in any language.
Yes.
So AMP was protecting its business, making sure its clients didn't leak out to MLC, for example. So yeah, it was never commercial, other than it held together AMP's client base. And yes, on that basis that it was pretty much cut in stone at 4 times, you, as a business owner, took out certain risks knowing that at least that risk was underwritten.
Absolutely.
My story, it probably needs to go back to the start, because now we're in a situation with the Bolar change was one issue, and that's kind of being addressed by the class action.
Yes.
The second issue is that there's best estimates somewhere between 300 and 400 advisors, which were essentially given their marching orders last August, I think it was.
Yeah.
August 19. October 19, I think, was when I had to make a decision. I was forced to make a decision that I didn't want to make, frankly. And that exit process has been nothing short of brutal. It's certainly been drawn out for those planners, and asking somebody to sit around and be a part of their own demise now for over 12 months is just, I think it's black and white wrong. So there's kind of two issues there. There's the bowler issue, which is being taken care of by the class action, and then there's the treatment of the exiting planners. To try and put it in some sort of context, I might start with the result and then go back and explain how the result is being perpetrated or manufactured. The result is that any of the exiting planners that weren't given a choice, they were told they had to basically exit or merge, are being given exit audits. And these exit audits are being conducted on the basis of a level of compliance that's never existed before. So the compliance hurdle has just been pushed up so far that nobody's actually passing it from the numbers that we can ascertain, which actually gives AMP the ability to reduce the exit payment. It's already been reduced once by the bowler change. So they're now using compliance as the tool to reduce the exit payment even further. So we get into the rights and wrongs of that. And then if you add to that a lot of these practices that AMP have said we don't want to deal with you anymore, are also in debt to AMP for books of clients that the practices have bought from AMP at 4 times. So basically, you buy a book of clients. In my case, it was $60,000 worth of revenue at 4 times. Simple maths, 240 grand, which was fully funded by AMP Bank. What I was betting on was my ability to grow the business. I wasn't betting that AMP would change the rules and raise the compliance standards to such an extent that I would hand them the ability to devalue the business they've just sold me to zero. I should add that the book of clients that I bought from AMP in 2015 was 98% grandfathered commissions. Should I have seen the writing on the wall when I did that? Maybe. But AMP also stood there and said, we'll give you 4 times your revenues. At that time, my ongoing fee revenue would have more than covered the debt anyway at 4 times.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, on balance, not a bad business risk.
Yes.
So there's a whole background story to that which we can get into, but that was the result. So the result in my case was in March this year. In February it was actually. They put me through an exit audit. They audited 15 OFA files, ongoing fee arrangement clients, and failed every single one. I maintain that I haven't done anything wrong, haven't received a client complaint in the 10 plus years that I've been with AMP or prior to that, bearing in mind that I've been an advisor since 96, and I've always operated on as a fee for service client advisor. Right of appeal not given in any meaningful sense. So that gave AMP the ability to turn off the fees to those clients. Going back in history in the last 12, 18 months, 2 years since the Royal Commission, my practice was struggling. You turn off the fees to half of my ongoing fee clients, and pretty much I'm insolvent. So at that point in time, I handed in my AR, my authorised representative, pretty much on the spot. and said, I still owe $200,000 to AMP Bank. I'll just have to try and negotiate with AMP Bank what to do about that. AMP Bank came after me pretty hard, and the one concession that they did offer was to say, we'll turn your loan into an interest-free facility pretty much forever. They weren't going to forgive the loan under any way, shape, form, but they said, we'll turn it into an interest-free on the proviso, and the devil's always in the detail, on the proviso that we take your family home as security for that facility. The family home is jointly owned with my partner, who has had nothing to do with the business. That's her financial security. And I was about to and AMP wanted to take that security away from her after they've thrown me under the bus. So that was a showstopper as far as I was concerned. The devil in the detail again was in the fine print of that contract was that anybody at AMP and at their absolute discretion could put the loan into default and make the loan instantly due and payable, at which point in time they could call in the security, being the family home, which is why I said, I was not prepared to do that to my partner. So yeah, that's my story. I believe, and there's some statistics that have come out recently, that there is potentially another 300 people having a similar experience. So what's come out, to get to the chase, so what's come out is there seems to be one set of compliance arrangements for exiting orders, exiting planners, and another set of compliance audits for planners that are staying there, that are remaining with AMP. It's not being applied consistently or evenly, is the way it's sort of panning out. And the situation is, in my mind, that the law should be applied equally. So we got to a situation, and there's a group of us that sort of banded together and trying to figure out a way out of this whole mess. It got to a situation where nobody was really taking it terribly seriously. AMP were doing a really good job of saying it's only one or two disgruntled advisors that really shouldn't be in the industry anyway, which is so far from the truth it's not funny. So they've been really doing a really good job of dividing and conquering. So a group of us kind of got together and said, this is just insane. It's having a huge toll on mental health and people's financial futures by a company we were supposedly in partnership with. Not just, and we're also talking about, potentially, many thousands of clients who have had their relationships with their advisors just severed without any planning, without any handovers, without. So clients are being left out high and dry as well as the advisors. So it got to a point where we started to talk to each other, and we were realizing that there's literally hundreds of us out there being literally thrown under the bus through this audit process and having our values destroyed. It's the value is still there. The clients haven't gone anywhere. The products are still being held by those clients, but it's the value to the advisors' practices that are being destroyed. So it's leaving literally hundreds of advisors in a really precarious, horrible financial situation. Many of us, I've been with AMP for 10 years. There's been, in one case, they're 18 years. So somewhere between 8 and 18 years is kind of the average tenure of the planners that we're talking about. Long-standing planners, never had an audit issue in the past, and I've been audited at least once a year in those 10 years, probably twice a year. And this is where we got to. We said, okay, AMP's using a weaponized audit process to transfer value from our practices back onto their balance sheets, essentially, onto its balance sheet. and leaving many of us with significant debts. At $200,000, I'm one of the smaller indebted planners. There's been planners out there that over the last 10, 15 years have been accumulating practices and books of clients as and when it permitted, and there's debts out there of $1 million with no asset behind it anymore. And those planners don't actually have, we'll get to it, but those planners don't have, they're restricted. They've signed contracts, and we'll get to the reason why you might sign these crazy contracts in a minute. They've signed contracts that won't allow them to work in the industry. And these are guys in their 50s, largely, people in their 50s, not just guys, people in their 50s that can't work in the industry that they've been a part of for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, that have been left with a debt with no real way of being able to deal with that debt. It's just a shocking situation. So, the planners, we started to talk to one another and realise that there's some really big common themes going through the way AMP are treating the exiting planners. So it came down to either AMP have been negligent in their corporate Corps Act responsibilities in regard to training and monitoring, or it's purely a weaponised audit. You can't have it both ways. On that basis, we agreed that there's actually something that needs to be reported here under any sort of ethical obligation to ASIC. And it might be just a way of getting the truth out there, because we've all been to remediation, or not remediation, mediation through the Small Business Ombudsman. And I can't really talk about that because I have signed confidentiality in relation to that, but I will say that it wasn't done in good faith. Mediation only works when two parties meet in good faith, and there was certainly no good faith as far as I was concerned with that whole process. And I actually came away from that mediation process quite pissed off that I'd given Ferrari the tool to stand in front of Parliament and say, we've mediated with any planner who wanted it. Nothing to see here. Couldn't be further from the truth. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean. They're doing a good job of sweeping it under the mat and putting the spin on it to keep a lid on the whole situation. Sorry, I've been rabbiting on a bit there. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. 2 weeks ago, and actually 2 weeks prior to 2 weeks ago, so a month ago, there was a letter that went to the chairperson at AMP and said, look, these are our concerns. What are you going to do to address them? And the message we got back loud and clear was nothing, knock yourselves out. So that's when the complaint was formally made to ASIC. So we did give AMP the opportunity to correct and make right the situation, but AMP are standing firm. And what we're talking about, we're talking about serious numbers here. In my case, prior to the Bolar change and admittedly the grandfather change, and the grandfather commissions admittedly made up about 20% of my revenues. So if you discount that 20% to zero, my business was worth at 4 times, let's call it $400,000, just to keep the maths really simple.
Yes.
You knock that down to 2.5 times, and then you send in the auditors to devalue it to zero, and I'm left with a business that's now worth zero, and I still owe AMP Bank $200,000.
Yeah,
and I'm a small fish.
Yeah, look, that story is tough. One that I've been using as a vicarious story, but it does relate, is when Uber came to Australia, the price of a taxi number plate was slashed because all of a sudden any car could be a taxi, right? And so what's really the story behind even the price of a taxi plate is really interesting in that wasn't government mandated. The Taxi Association got together at some point, not that long ago, at some point said, hey, we need a retirement fund here what we're going to do is we're just going to call a taxi plate $400,000. And so out of nowhere, an asset value was created and agreed upon in that one person could sell it to the next, could sell it to the next, could sell it to the next. Now, as Uber came in, it eradicated the value. The government stepped in. Mind you, this $400,000 taxi plate was, as I said, wasn't government mandated. It was simply a contract between, or a level of understanding between taxi drivers. And yet the government still stepped in because this business model eradicated their value and said, what we're going to do is we're going to create a fund, a pool of money. How we're going to collect that pool of money is every single share ride is going to get taxed $1. So wherever you go, every ride is $1. And that $1 from every single user, every single ride will go into a pool, and that pool of money will actually pay for the devastating reduction in asset value. Now, what I find interesting about AMP planners and their contracts with AMP is that unlike the taxi drivers, there was a contract in place, a pretty robust contract. And yet, still, AMP has made moves which has put some advisors in a worse position. And they've done their best to find clauses in the contract which allow them to do so. Now, do I understand why they would do that from a business strategy point?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. I fully understand that. But because I understand their motivation, does it allow them to sidestep certainly the broad understanding of the contract that they entered into with AMP financial planners? Obviously, I don't think so. And yes, there's this class action going on. But what I find disappointing is that taxi drivers, and whatever your opinion is of taxi drivers, but taxi drivers were considered disadvantaged simply by capitalism, like with a competing business model, and the government came in to save the day. AMP planners were, I would say, in some cases, devastated with the outcome that was applied to them, and that they actually had a contract in place, a lot more security than a basic understanding between taxi drivers. But the government hasn't done anything for these planners. Now, I'm not like this person that comes out and says the government needs to solve all problems. However, I just think there's a strong analogy there with the taxi drivers, and there's more of a case that these planners should get looked after, but they haven't. And I have mates, like I got a couple of really good mates that are been roped up into this position. And so I certainly feel for them. When it came to that contract, that was the infamous contract that was put in front of everyone, none of my mates have been able to speak about it, so I know nothing about it. Can you walk us through some of the options? Because there were options in this contract, right?
Yeah. I was given 4 options as a result of the Bollard changes. And AMP said, look, for whatever reason, but the rumor is that they only want to deal with larger practices. And it makes some sense, economies of scale, all that, from a business point of view. No harm, no foul.
Yep.
Yeah, my business model has been one for the last 10 years that AMP, for all intents and purposes, looked like they were wanting to encourage. But something's changed, new managing director and new ideas, and it happens all the time in corporate world. But at no point in time was I given the option to take my debt, take my clients, and take my business. It was the 4 options that were presented to me was a fast and accelerated bowler exit, allegedly to take place within 6 months. I could merge with another practice to increase those economies of scale. I could pay out the debt and take my clients, but I had to pay out my debt with AMP Bank first. And what was the 4th option? Standard bowler. So 2.5 year plus exit process.
Right. Interesting.
So I had those 4 options.
But the fact that they even gave you a 2.5 times bowler is just such a, I mean, that is a, you'd say almost a 40% reduction in the asset value that they had loaned against. And that's the other part that I find weird about all of this, is that on the asset column, they're able to write down the value, but on the liability column, they didn't write it down as well. They didn't equal that reduction. To me, I think they could have saved a lot of heartache just by, if you're going to force this change upon the market, then you need to also take the liability, reduce the liability as well. I mean, it only just makes sense.
If you're making the rules, why would you do that? Bear in mind, my asset is their liability.
Right.
My liability is their asset.
Yes.
So if you write down the liability from their point of view, my value,
yeah,
you've actually, it's a great business model if you can get away with it.
Oh, if you can get away with it. But if there's 3, let's talk, like, let's do some quick numbers. Say 300 advisors. Let's say average debt is probably close to, I don't know, it's probably going to be $500,000. What's that? So if we go $500,000 times 300, we're talking, 150 mil. Look, that's a decent chunk of change. However, I mean, their asset value as a company has gone down much more than $150 million during this whole journey. And so potentially there's an element of saying, well, and not everyone would have just gone full bowler as well. Some people would have taken the choice to buy back the reduced value from the bank. So you're probably looking at, you'd probably say 50-50 of those people would go along with the full buyback. You're talking a $75 million reduction compared to the billions of dollars that they've lost in capital value to the company.
Well, we're also talking about AMP Bank's balance sheet now and their statutory obligations. You start to wipe off 150 million of AMP Bank's assets.
Well, AMP should have provided that cash then.
You'd think.
I do think, and I don't think it's unreasonable, to be honest. I think that it's a perfectly logical thing. If you're going to come in and enforce these actions, then I mean, I want to be careful with my words here, but basically, if you offer someone to buy an asset and then you're going to be the funder of that asset, and then you turn the asset to zero, but insist on the liability, you're going to create an absolute storm. Fact.
But AMP's arrogance, I think, knows no equal. And what's come out through all of this is licensees, and look, AMP is not the only one to be doing it from what I'm hearing either. Licensees make the rules. That's the way the law has been structured. The licensees make the rules up as they go. And this is proving it. They can make the rules up to suit themselves. Under law, ARs only ever act as agent for a licensee. So you can put whatever you like, sign whatever contracts you can like, but AMP has changed the rules as it sees fit in order to protect the license, in inverted commas, and to keep, so that's what they're doing. They're just changing the rules to suit themselves, and they're doing it in such a way by forcing people to, the way they're doing it is to say, unless you sign this contract and keep confidentiality, we'll take away whatever crumbs are currently on the table, which is what they did with me, essentially. They said, we'll give you an interest-free loan. There's the crumb. If you don't play our game, that's gone as well. So their backing plan is up against the wall. And look, when they audited my 15 files, they didn't audit all of my 15 files. Interestingly enough, they only audited enough to send me to the wall. With those 15 files, they then had, because ASIC is watching, because there was an audit fail, they had to remediate those files. And some of my clients received checks essentially for lack of provision of ongoing plan of services
How did that conversation go with your client?
Clients are going, what the hell? What? It was a WTF. I've got to check here.
Did they take you out for dinner at least? Jesus Christ.
One client was so incensed because the letter that accompanied it was pretty defaming.
Yeah.
One of my long-term clients was so incensed, they wrote a please explain letter to AMP, which is still unanswered.
Yeah.
And look, fortunately, I've been able to pick up the threads of my business, and look, at this point in time, I'm only missing 2 of my preferred clients, sort of 6 months down the track.
Yeah.
Which is unlike, because I resigned my AR, I was only subject to a 6-month restraint of trade rather than a 3-year restraint of trade. If AMP had paid me $1, I would have been handcuffed by a 3-year restraint of trade.
But you still walked out with $200,000 debt.
Yeah, and I haven't signed any of their, I'm going to say it, their bullshit contracts, because I refinanced that debt through other sources, which AMP obviously didn't see coming.
Yeah. And so are you a part of the class action?
Yeah, because part of what they wanted me to sign was also waiving all rights to all future actions against AMP forever.
Wait, so all the people that should be in this class act, are you saying that those, that 300 odd advisors who were asked to leave, were they forced to sign something that says they can't be in the class action?
Yes.
Bollocks. Are you serious?
I am deadly serious. It's come out as part of the class action hearing. I think it was on the 3rd of December, and Cause said to the judge, this is just wrong. And so the concession was, now AMP have to spell out to people that they want to have sign these contracts that if they do sign, they'll be waiving their rights. So now AMP have actually got to spell it out. They're still putting these bullshit contracts in front of exiting planners, but now AMP have actually got to spell it out that anybody who signs will be waiving their rights.
But they're the people that the class action is for. So
yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how this is going to play out, but it's all sorts of wrong. So
the class action, the beneficiaries of the class action happen to be the people that are staying in AMP because they're not signing anything. Wow. So the people that are in slightly different circumstances to yourself, who strangely enough, you being in a worse position has miraculously turned around to be slightly better position, because at least you can join the class action. But that's insanely disappointing to hear that the people that need this class action the most, that the main reason that this class action exists, can't accept the people who need it the most.
We've also got a situation now where you've got the advisors that are still in AMP shitting themselves, because if they side with the advisors that are on the way out or have already exited, they risk putting a target on their back and being treated the same way we've been treated. So you've got...
Well, who's in this class action then?
Yeah, it's getting pretty crazy.
There's going to be one guy, Neil McDonald. He gets hundreds of millions of dollars. Neil, lunch is on you. Jesus. That's very
scary.
I think that's almost the right word for it. Yeah. It is a pretty scary picture that you just painted there. Yeah.
I said this is a brutal and systematic destruction of value by one of Australia's largest financial services companies.
Yeah.
And it's just wrong.
Yeah. So what do you reckon? Let's say the class action exists, or let's say it's successful or it's not successful or whatever. If there's if there's hundreds of advisors out there that are finding that they're not a part of this class action, I think there's still a level of help from the government. Now, I'm always sparsely, I don't very often like to recommend that as a solution, but I just think in this case,
we look like we were going to get a parliamentary inquiry going. And the beautiful thing about parliamentary parliament, is that confidentiality flies out the window. There's parliamentary privilege.
Well, also it supersedes any contract law as well.
Yeah. So, it was the perfect place for the truth to actually be addressed in its entirety.
And what's happening there?
Well, the Labor senators, God love them, are all for it.
Right.
Liberal senators are stymieing it.
Why? Who? Do you know what are their names?
Yeah. I can look them up.
Yeah.
But that's essentially what's going on. And then you've got to start to ask questions about, who's manipulating the political landscape.
Well, in your opinion, who would that be? I got no idea.
I want to be careful.
Okay. No, fair enough. It's sensitive in nature. That's okay.
I don't want to start.
I respect that.
But it's a question that I think is appropriate to ask. You got one side of government going, there's a real sense that we need to be seen to be doing something here. And then on the other side of government, nothing to see here, folks.
Right. Yeah. I think it comes down. I mean, going back to the taxi drivers, if the government's going to do something for the taxi drivers, they should well be doing something for these AMP planners. Mate, thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, that's a conversation that I've been hoping to have for 18 months. And that's kind of, because there was a lot of confidentiality there. And so it's been great to get to the bottom of, those options that were there and the details around getting involved in the class action or not. I'll ask you a sort of a question. Are you hopeful that there will be a positive outcome for advisors, or have you accepted that it is what it is, and you guys just didn't end up on the...
Look, for my own part, I've got a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm now moving on with my business and my life. I'm $200,000 in debt, over and above the value that I've lost building up over the last 10 years being associated with AMP. I've been able to retrieve some of that value because I have seriously loyal clients. But for the guys that have had no option but to take the crumbs that AMP's left on the table and sign away all their rights in the process, that are still in debt, that still can't work for 3 years, they're the guys that I and ladies that I really, really feel for, because there's a distinct lack of hope for that group of people.
Yeah,
which is just a horrible place to be.
Yeah,
my retirement plans got thrown out the window. I thought I'd just continue on building my business up until I was 65. Here you go, AMP. Take it away at 4 times. Thanks for the memories.
Yes. Which is what you signed up for.
Which is what I signed up for.
Yes.
At 55, I got to make every single moment count.
Yeah.
And at 54, I am sorry. But at least I have the ability to dig myself out of the hole. There's lots and lots of people who don't. So have I moved on? Yes, I have moved on to some extent. I'm still dirty that AMP, and I think in any sort of, and I've said this before, in any sort of moral or ethical sense, this is an out-and-out crime.
Doesn't pass phase you.
Not at all. Not the least little bit. Doesn't pass the smell test, the pub test, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the Aussie spirit, it's just been shat on.
Yeah.
So it's all sorts of wrong. Whether we're going to see the right result, maybe it's just me being cynical. I'd like to think we'd see at least a better result than what's being achieved by the planners at the moment, particularly the exiting planners. As I said, there's kind of 2 camps there at the moment.
Yeah.
And I put the exiting planners, and we're going back to the mood at AMP changed in sort of January 2018. So we're 2 years worth of people that have been trying to get out of AMP, the ones that were giving their marching orders and that are still there. And then there's the ones that are still at AMPFP that are keeping their heads down and hoping they don't attract the same sort of attention that we've attracted from AMP for fear of being in exactly the same situation. So they're sitting there saying, yeah, we'll do what, AMP's got a massive gun to everybody's head, including the ones that AMP are saying they want to keep. So there's some competing factions going on as well. So am I hopeful? Look, I think someone was like able to put one foot in front of the other. I'm a fairly optimistic sort of guy. I think there's always hope. Where realistically I think the right thing is going to happen, I've got some really cynical doubts. I think it's been 2 years now since all this hit the fan.
Yeah.
It's 3 years since since the Royal Commission.
Yeah.
It's been dragging on for a hell of a long time now. AMP could have done the right thing and could have moved on with their business model. They've chosen to throw people who can't defend themselves under the bus and sweep it all under the mat in the process. It's just wrong. Black and white wrong.
Yeah.
And they seem to be getting away with it.
Yeah.
So,
mate, thank you again, David, for coming on, sharing all that. It's been illuminating, to say the very least. And I think with AMP being such an important part of the financial services landscape in this country, I think we probably would have liked a better outcome. And mate, I applaud you mentioned the Aussie spirit, the Anzac spirit that you have, the resilience that you're putting forward and going out there to get it. So I congratulate you on that. And sucks that all that happened to you and hundreds of other advisors, but hopefully, there's something that's on the other side of all of this. And I really do hope that. So for Christmas, mate, enjoy your time with the family, all those good things. And then I'm excited to see what you do with your business next year and moving onwards. There's a whole new way of doing things, right? You've been thrown into it now. So all the best to you.
Yeah, thanks, Clayton.
Good on you. All right. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.